Welcome to the top 20 video game music. This episode is all about dungeon music as chosen by our wonderful group on Discord. Join the Discord if you want to take part every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. This is from Legend of Zelda, the Windwaker, the Earth Temple, the Earth Dungeon. Our first choice from the chat, from the Discord, is by Prince. It is called Manitou Dungeon. This is from Devil Summoner Soul Hackers. Get ready. You know, if I just thought of the term Dungeon Week, I would think it's going to sound like this. Like the actual literal feeling of being in a dungeon. It's dark, there's no hope of escape, wet, menacing, maybe you're being tortured. This fits that really, really well. Super oppressive, super claustrophobic. Although I think a lot of the themes we're going to hear this week are from dungeon themes that are trying to motivate the player to continue or to enjoy being in the dungeon. Something you're going to have to do for a large chunk of uninterrupted gameplay. Soul Hackers. That was a pretty nice first opening track to set the theme for what a literal dungeon theme might sound like. Next up, we've got a Cyclone track. This is from Super Nintendo, probably going to sound a lot cozier. Lufia 2, The Last Duel. There, now that's what I'm talking about in terms of the other side of the dungeon themes being really soft, hopeful, heroic. Yeah, you're underground, but I mean, there's not really a lot of this that makes it feel like you are even in a dungeon, other than maybe like a slow kind of heavy beat over top of the other more hopeful instruments. Sort of like it's slower and plodding, although this is a lot faster, this part here. Maybe like, I think the drum beat is probably the only part of it that makes me feel like in a dungeon. This could very well be like a flying theme or something. That's from Lufia 2. Our next dungeon theme is from Final Fantasy XIV. This is the twinning theme, A Long Fall. Wow, there are a lot of things going on in this track. With video games, dungeon doesn't always mean going underground. It could be a tower. I think a dungeon has a very general definition in video games. It's an enclosed place you go to that you spend some time that you need to get from the start to the end, going through enemies along the way or challenges along the way, or solving puzzles perhaps. And you're not able to leave this place until you've completed it, or you can leave before you complete it, but you need to complete it, unless it's an optional one. It's a very loose thing, it being a dungeon. This is apparently a level 80 dungeon called the Twinning, and I think that the music, at least the first part of it, the way that it builds and builds up and constantly changes keys and has a very fast dance beat to it, with like the heavy guitar, it gives it like you're kind of going insane, or like things are just about to get out of your control. Which would make sense. I'm assuming a level 80 dungeon is very high. It's much higher than level 79. The Twinning theme, A Long Fall. Our next track is chosen by Rudy. This is from the great Xenogears on the PlayStation 1. The track is called Foreboding, and it's composed by Yasunori Mitsuda. That's a wonderful description, Prince. Ancient ruins that have been flooded. The way the reverb is... There's a lot of reverb, and the percussion is very sparse, which makes it sound kind of ancient. There's hard, like, just very... Almost like you're listening to a rock fall from high above, you know, a stalactite hitting the ground and echoing through a big chamber, and then those long... big, heavy synth pads could be that flooding. Definitely has a lot of introspection to it. Like you're slowly exploring something really big. Dark and expansive, absolutely. Rudy thinks the first time you hear in the worst dungeon in the whole game, and the final one. The first dungeon. This is a really beautiful track. There's some really beautiful movements. One in particular. It just sort of drones on that same key scale. Oh, right there. It breaks from what it's droning from. Oh. Like a huge realization. Wow. That's very, very powerful. Our next track is chosen by Lynott from Persona 5, The Days When My Mother Was Here. Persona 5 really took that feeling of the Persona games having a lot of style and swagger to the ultimate level. I think this game was really poised to finally be a breakout hit for Persona 5 after all the love that Persona 4 got, and especially Persona 4 Golden. Persona 5 being a full-on, big-ass PS4 game that could still run on the PS3. So it did have some lower resolution textures. But low-res textures don't matter when you can see on the screen the incredible UI on display. And the music was so good. Even though I picked NieR Automata as my soundtrack of the year, I always felt like I went off the strength of a few NieR Automata tracks and didn't really give enough credit to the sheer amount of amazing tracks in Persona 5. I mean, look at these screen wipes and transitions. So I think because the game is so stylized and it's all about really relaxing and enjoying the grind of a JRPG and the grind of a Persona game, that's why this dungeon track gets away with not really sounding like a dark and dungy dungeon. And the dungeons aren't caves. The dungeons are an office or like a nightclub or something. I mean, Persona 5 games they're sort of like, they get it. You're going to have to put a lot of hours into this, and they want you to really enjoy it. So they try to make it as, take away all the stress and just give you a nice groove. So I think it works thematically with the game. That was my first phase of sitting on an exercise ball. Little trivia for you. Our next track is chosen by Claudio. It is the Color Dungeon from The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the Switch. Now that is a classic remake of the original dungeon theme from the first Zelda on the NES. Very, very faithful in the way that the NES track, being on a Nintendo, only has 4 channels of music. And this really doesn't add much more. Even here, when it shifts to different instruments, it removes the previous instruments, the way the NES would have had to do. And this is also a remake of a Game Boy Color game, and I'm not sure if maybe they just used the same NES dungeon theme for the Game Boy Color, or the regular Game Boy that it was on. But yeah, very faithful remake, just like the game is, where they, obviously the game that we're looking at here, everything is brand new, the visuals, but it's still, what a fun little puzzle this is. So simple, just so satisfying, just adds a little wrinkle to it. Yeah, really nice, really sparse. Sometimes you do these orchestral remakes of classic songs and something can get kind of lost because they're adding so much more, especially things that don't need to be there and weren't there in the first place. So everything you add really needs to have purpose. The Game Boy Dungeon also used the Zelda 1 song. Okay, I love the Game Boy hardware, it's fantastic. It was a really nice elevation of the NES sounds. Next up, a selection by Chris. This is Moonlighter. The track is Forbidden Steps. Man, what a beautiful track. I like the way Claudio puts that. Going out at night on an adventure with high hopes and nothing to lose. I think of if you were going spelunking into a big, giant, gaping hole in the ground. Almost like climbing up a mountain, but the reverse. Kind of leaping and bounding as you go further and further down. A track with a lot of hope and a bit of kind of like exotic Egyptian scale mystery. Similar to what you'd hear in Uncharted. Really nice. High production on it. Nice use of the orchestra. But not overdoing it. A very, very tasteful track. I like it. Next up, another Chris track. There are dungeon tracks and there are Gungeon tracks. This is from Enter the Gungeon. Gungeon up, Gungeon down. Wow, that is a heck of a track. A lot of different sounds, a real bold swagger and a willingness to change the form of the song and change the instrumentation of the song on a whim, which I think fits really well with the game's design of being able to switch in different guns and switch in different offense and defensive strategies that are very overwhelming at a time. The way that the percussion sounds like its own kind of bullet hell. Yeah, we haven't heard any loop yet. The track just continues to evolve. In the first portion of the track, it sounded like there were almost like steel drum pieces being used. A really incredible track. I haven't played this game. I haven't heard the soundtrack before, unless it's been brought up on a previous episode. But this is my most surprising track of the week and makes me want to listen to this soundtrack a lot more. Beautiful. Our next choice is from Claudio, from Octopath Traveler, The Dark Caverns. Really, really gorgeous track, really warm. Yeah, like you're creeping through something sort of lit by candlelight. Through a castle, through a dungeon. One step at a time. Slowly making your way through. Almost a little sad about what you're going to discover or what you're leaving behind. Almost would have been interesting if they had 8 different composers to really switch it up and make it feel like all the different stories were so different. Very interesting. Next up is a lean-out pick, unfortunately. It's from Yakuza Like a Dragon, the Millennium Tower Dungeon. It's nice. The Yakuza tracks usually have a mixture of pulsating, dancey action with a soulfulness to it, or emotional sound of it, like Rudy says. Emotional super hype. Really kind of gooey and modern sounding. It's a nice video game track. I think if you put it on to somebody who didn't play video games, they wouldn't be surprised to know this is from a video game, or they might even guess it is. Pretty cool. This next one is chosen by Rudy. Sen no Kiseki IV, Synchronicity, number 23. Yeah, this is very different from what you'd expect out of a dungeon. Definitely a JRPG dungeon. And then just through the sheer amount of numbers of JRPGs being pumped out with this type of dungeon theming. These are long games, these are grindy games. Like Persona, they're more, they go for like an entertaining feel. They know they have to put a lot of hours into them. Everything in it is like very pretty. When you think of these JRPG games, you know, the characters have cat ears and are beautiful women and beautiful men. They're dressed in really nice clothing, rather than say like something that would look like it would protect them. There's lots of nice flashing lights, nice use of color. The UI is highly stylized, and the music fits that cohesion of make it a very pleasant experience. If people have to spend 100 hours on it, and they're going to be maybe replaying it or checking out every side piece. Sure, and like the customization of the different outfits and stuff, and cat ears and all that shit. So that's where you start hearing music like this for a dungeon. I never would have guessed it, but we have 2 tracks this week from the game La-Mulana. This first one is chosen by Cyphlon. The track is called Fearless. Challenger. Yeah, it definitely has a very Super Nintendo Mega Man feel to it, with that galloping rock drum beat, the Super NES palette of sounds and tones, and the scale that it's using as well. A very heroic sound. I mean, this is, for a game like this where you're playing an Indiana Jones inspired character, complete with dusty fedora. What would you call that jacket he's wearing? Leather? Suede? Canvas? But he has a whip. He has a whip and a fedora, and he's plundering treasure out of dungeons. So these kind of dungeons are more of like the swashbuckling fantasy style. They're fun dungeons, where you're being a hero in them. So I think this type of music fits that really, really well. I'm really surprised at the variety we've gotten in dungeon music this week. You hear that word and you think you're just going to listen to an hour of very depressing, oppressive, claustrophobic music. But we get fun stuff like this and through many other tracks. Hey, look. It's from the first Persona game, Mikage Police Station. This is selected by Prince. Man, does the Persona music ever fail to impress? In an industry of incredibly impressive music, the Persona tracks always feel really fun, really dancey, never obnoxious, just something you don't mind hanging out with for hours upon hours, feeling great when exploring a lot of the darker themes in the Persona games. They're all so good. I haven't dove into much of what's in Persona 2 and 3, but I've heard the shit out of Persona 4 and 5, and a lot of Shin Megami Tensei tracks, especially the last couple months we've been doing these ones. Probably one of the first tracks I've heard from the first Persona. And in the chat, somebody had said that the music was far better than the actual game. Although Prince, it's his favorite. Really cool. Another from the Persona world, another selected by Prince. Prince doing a good job of staying away from SpongeBob and very bad licensed games based on toys and cartoons. This track is called Heaven from Persona 4 Dancing by ATOLS, ATOLS, featuring Hatsune Miku.
Run towards that heart, my soul, removing that from my mind. Those long days passing, I want that door. Like lights, the night is slowly fade away. Finding ways through the memory to play all day with my arms closed. Those long days passing, I want that door. Like lights, the night is slowly fade away. Finding ways through the memory to play me with the host sometimes. I can't remember the smile that you gave it to me. I have no way to tell you, don't look away. Seems so lucky, sometimes it hurts my soul to get free. Let my heart is from a chain. Those long days passing, I want that door. Like friends, now they slowly disappear. Finding ways through the memory box, cutting me without the breeze. Those long days passing, I want that door. Like friends, now they slowly disappear. Finding ways through the memory friends, feeling me with one impress. Those long days passing, I want that door. Like friends, now they slowly fade away. Finding ways through the memory to play all day.
Well, that is a very, very intense song. There's a really modern, futuristic feel to it. And I'm sure there's a whole genre of music that sounds like this that has been made for many years, so it's not necessarily in the future. But to me, the way that it uses those like kind of dubsteppy tones and beats and rhythms and just like really intensely pulling you from one place to the other with that heavily accented Japanese English that sounds like a Japanese Google robot is translating Japanese to you with some of the weird line readings. I like it. I like the sounds. It's one of those songs that I think is really effective. I probably couldn't listen to a whole album of it because it is so intense and because a lot of it is like going to the extremes of the scale and taking the notes and the rhythms and the feel of it. But pretty effective in small doses. Really, really intense. Wow. Oh, it's a robot? Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Would you have guessed we'd have two La-Mulana tracks picked by different people? This is a Oh, no, it isn't. It's just by Cyclone. Oh, you picked two from the same game. Ooh, that's breaking the rules. But I didn't pick up on it. All right, another track from La-Mulana. It's called Giant's Cry. Yeah, pretty nice track. Very serviceable. Does the job well. Not really doing much new, but just enough if you're a fan of Super Nintendo era music and sounds, the composition, it's a very good recreation of that era. Looks like it fits the game really well. That's really trying to be as true to Super Nintendo as it possibly can be with all those visuals. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a remaster of some kind. But I'd never heard of it before, so who knows? Yeah, very Castlevania sounding. The way that you have those descending things. There you go. La-Mulana. Our next track, chosen by Rudy, is from Zero no Kiseki, Trails from Zero. The track is called Geofront. Get with it. Nice track. Really nice sounds from the Falcom sound team. Of course. I'm assuming this is a 3DS game? Really beautiful visuals. I love this whole era of them updating what looked so good on a Super Nintendo JRPG, but adding different perspectives. Oh, it was on the PSP. Okay. Yeah, the visuals, like the rooms are great. It's such a beautiful update and an evolution of not just making something look exactly like it did on the Super Nintendo, but pushing it ahead and staying in the same realm. But like the lighting is gorgeous and the music is really updated as well. It's still all MIDI stuff, which I think works when it's all MIDI together. Then nothing is really standing out, and like the sounds that they choose are really well done. And it's just a really nice hybrid of what video game music does so well. You can have a dancey feel, you can make it curious, you can make it upbeat, you can have some beautiful orchestration. Really nice. And this was the first full 3D game in the series. And I love that simulated lightning. One of our last remaining tracks here, track number 17 in our top 20, chosen by Leonard from NieR Replicant version 1.22. This is Shadowlord's Castle/Memory. A very emotional soundtrack with a lot of repeated themes throughout, which I think works really, really well for the game in terms of its story. From what I've played in NieR Automata and NieR Replicant, it's a lot of emotional, fantastical story beats that are repeated, and a lot of the gameplay is repeated, and you often replay through sections of the game from different perspectives. So I like the way that the music is always sort of looping, but still maintaining a lot of drama and emotional weight without ever getting annoying. I can listen to that same looped main theme that they play in the overworld over and over and over again. And how Leonard says, thinking about what you did, and Rudy feeling very introspective. The way that the chords shift and kind of go down and up, changing like the bass notes throughout, is very it's like a beautiful kind of spiral, like a snake eating itself. And actually, Chris calling it very unwelcoming. That's true. It sounds like you are coming to something. It's like you've walked into somebody else's religious ceremony. Something important is happening here, and you are not welcome. And it's interesting how they achieve that. I think it's the constant church organ and the way that it jumps very dramatically to different chords and different parts of the scale. A lot of high jumps, a lot of movement. Like something serious is happening, but it's never done in a really comforting way until it resolves the chord at the end of the phrase. But yeah, it's definitely moving in extreme patterns. Church dungeon, yeah. And for enough people, just it sounding like church is going to be oppressive enough. I haven't heard this one. Has a distant sound like you're outside of the event. Yeah, it sounds like the organ surrounding it is this kind of impenetrable force field, and that in the center of the mix are these voices, a choir voice that keeps it away from you. Definitely very cohesive with what they attempt to do in the NieR, Replicant, and Automata stories. Track number 18. This is from Claudio, from the Super Nintendo game Lagoon, Walking in the Shadows, Gold Cave. Yeah, very dark theme. Really cold. Sort of, I want to say the percussion that is almost lifeless. It's almost very cold sounding. Very thin and like frail sounding. Hard. It's very sort of like hard kick sound with a little bit of reverb on it. It sounds really dirty and dark. And even the parts here where it could sound like it's going to get more hopeful, like there's more life to it, there's more light, it sounds like it's still being held down by the notes around it. And there's just not a lot there to grab onto in terms of music. Like it's just you alone in this dark place. Good dungeon theme. Talk about old school. This is from the original RuneScape. This track is called The Terrible Tower. Chosen by Chris. is a really fun track. It's got more of like a kooky Halloween, like spooky feel rather than say scary or dark or oppressive. It's not very serious. The bolero boom gong gong rhythm gives it a real kind of fun movement. The pizzicato strings gives it sort of like a light placement of things. It's a really goofy track. It's trying to have fun. Fun though. Really fun. Something you can listen to for a while. Going around a haunted cornfield or something. Goofy spooky. Alright, our last track of the week. If you're watching the high quality upload on YouTube, it will end after a minute or so of this track. So another one chosen by Chris. It is from The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages, Level 4 Skull Dungeon. If you're watching the stream, we'll continue talking after this track is played, and we'll choose the theme for next week. Thanks for watching.